All right, hi everyone. Sorry for the delay there. Okay, so yes, welcome everybody, and hello, welcome to this evening's Year of the Rocket virtual panel discussion. My name is Serena, and I am the Marketing Director at Sutherland House Books. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on Paul Wood's YouTube channel, also called Year of the Rocket. That channel has a wide array of videos related to the 1991 Argos, so I recommend you check it out. We do still have a discount code available for anyone who has not yet purchased a copy of the book on the Sutherland House Books website. That discount code is ROCKET20, that's ROCKET in all caps. There you can receive 20% off the book. There is a link available on our Eventbrite announcement page. You can also feel free to contact me via Eventbrite if you have any questions regarding the discount code. So this webinar will last 1 hour. And in addition to a wide-ranging discussion among the panelists, we will set aside some time towards the end for your questions. We have already received some questions, so thank you for that. You can also submit your questions during the event by writing them in the chat box below. We will do our best to get in as many questions as possible. So again, welcome. Now let me introduce our panelists. So of course, we have with us the author of Year of the Rocket, Paul Wood. Also with us, former Argos star Carl Brazley and former Skydome and MLSC executive Richard Peddie, who is now in the book business as a proprietor of the River Book Shop in Amherstburg, Ontario. Also joining us today are journalists Mary Ormsby and Paul Hunter, who covered the Argos in the 80s and 90s for the Toronto Star. So I will start off by sharing a short clip. Then I will give the mic over to Mary, who will be leading this discussion. So let me share my screen. Okay. There we go. And
right out of Hollywood, literally. The PEC News Conference, more people jammed into one little room at the Skydome than appeared at any Argos home game last year. The stars: Bruce McNall, sports entrepreneur; John Candy, homegrown movie star; Wayne Gretzky, homegrown hockey star. And what a show it was.
I don't think they have that happen. But
Yes,
well, that's the end of that.
you've seen it now.
You've seen it now. The Argos of.
There she is. Marlene Dietrich is with us. Our silent partner. We were saving this for later. But... Over the weekend, with CFL approval, McNall and company bought the Argos from Harry Arnett.
But as I understand it, it's a $5 million price range. So you told me. What? Yep. $1 million. Oh, he's out. I need some other partner.
okay, so Mary?
Okay, well, that is a wonderful memory. And, you know, it's really an iconic moment in Argo history, Paul, and a very wide plank for your book, Year of the Rocket. So could you just put that moment at the time in context for us? And also, you know, what was at stake for the Argos and the CFL at large in that moment with these guys riding into town with glamour, glitz, and apparently all kinds of money?
Oh, thanks, Mary. It's a great question. I mean, you know, when I set out to do the book, I knew I had an amazing story to work with. You know, it may not have been the greatest Argonaut team of all time, but it was the craziest, wildest, greatest year of all time, I think. And I felt I had a solemn obligation to sort of do justice to it. The league was in pretty rough shape. I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we go through the next 45 minutes or an hour. And you know, those guys, the arrival of Bruce McNall, John Candy, and Wayne Gretzky was seen as a really necessary salvation for a venture that had seemed to be going in the wrong direction throughout the 1980s, basically. It really was a blast out of Hollywood. It was like, wow, how did this happen? Could it even be real? And then a whole pile of things happened over the course of that year that also, even 30 years later, don't necessarily seem like they really did happen. I'm going to stop blabbing, although I'm sure I'll have a few more things to say. I'm really looking forward to hearing what the panel has to say about, their own memories and recollections. The fact that I was able to speak to so many people associated with that story, whether it was executives like Richard, coaches and players like Carl, journalists like yourself and Paul, so many folks associated in some way with the team or the league at the time. What I discovered over the course of 4 or so years was that it was an even more fascinating and interesting story than I'd realized. Before I wrap up, I just do want to say, aside from this wonderful panel that we put together, that's Serena and Sutherland House have put together, we've got some luminaries with us tonight. David Watkins, I believe, is with us. David was the communications manager for the Argonauts back then. He had the sometimes challenging responsibility of managing the relationship between Rocket and the media, among many other things. I hope we'll have, I saw on the list, I hope we're going to have Lonnie Gleiberman with us. Lonnie came into the league as an owner of the Ottawa Rough Riders in 1991, very much thanks to the work that John Candy did to bring Lonnie and his dad Bernie into the league. And I can certainly tell the folks that are listening tonight or watching tonight that from talking to Lonnie, it's really evident to me how true a CFL fan he is. He grew up across the border. He was in Detroit, but they picked up the games across from Windsor, and he grew up. He told me all kinds of names from the 70s, the guys that he and his friends were pretending they were in the on the sandlots of Detroit. We've also got Laurie Bursey with us. Laurie is the all-time greatest Argo fan ever, someone whose passion we as Argo fans should all strive to emulate. I think we've got Don Landry, the longtime voice of the Argonauts at both Sky Dome or Rogers Center and BMO for many years. Lots of other great Argo fans. I've got a few members of my own family who obviously aren't yet sick of me blabbing on about this subject like I have for the last 5 years. And Don Gibb, the great Don Gibb, who was my editor and writing coach, who really helped me frame and tell the story properly and find my writing voice. So that's all I'm going to say to start with. Thanks. I'll turn it back to you, Mary.
That's great. We are so fortunate to have a man who was in that video clip we just saw. So fortunate to have Richard Peddie here with us. At that time, he was the big cheese at Sky Dome. And Richard, I'm wondering if you can just tell us what your thoughts were in that moment and of that day. Sort of Hollywood comes to town to show us how it's done here in Toronto. And, were you of the mind that the saviors had arrived?
Well, I was coming off a couple of years of Harry Ornest, so I was really thankful for the change. A man that squeezed blood out of a penny. And so these, I did not know any of these gentlemen prior, but they came in with a real bang, came in with a West Coast arrogance and sophistication. They thought we were all hicks. But, I was running the world's greatest entertainment center. Hard Rock Cafe, the roof moved. People were coming to Sky Dome just to see the roof move. So, we had something to sell, and it was great to rub shoulders with them. And I remember that day, I sure look a lot skinnier. And I remember the sign falling down. I don't remember I think that was their PR problem, not ours. But yeah, it was, great hope, great expectations, money, sizzle, stars from cinema and sports. It looked like a really great winning formula.
Now, Richard, at the time, there was another tenant in the world's greatest entertainment center, wasn't there?
Yeah, pretty major one who was having some great success with baseball.
Right. So I just want to ask you a little bit about that. And when the McDonald Company did come into town, were they fully prepared? Did they realize that there was did they know that they had to maybe, work in tandem with the Jays and dates and things? Or were they maybe a little shocked at how busy Sky Dome really was with all the events besides sports.
I don't think so. You know, again, they were coming off the LA Kings and the success of him changing the colors and bringing Gretzky in. They seemed to think they had the formula. So I don't remember that. I mean, I don't know if they did the due diligence on the contract. They sure didn't know the cost of running Skydome. It was very expensive, and that started really hurting them. They went in with just great optimism, probably with not a lot of details.
Okay. Now, Paul Hunter covered the CFL for the Toronto Star back in the day, and you had the great privilege, Richard's already mentioned him, of working with Harry Ornest with your coverage. Is there a way for you, Paul, to compare the Harry Ornest Argonauts and, a big night was $1 hot dog night, I think, with the champagne tastes and the money and the glitz and the glamour that the McNall and Company group did bring in? So is there something you could sort of set the scene there for people? Like, this was a very big change.
I think Harry, wasn't he the one that also brought in the dancing dogs, or I can't remember. He used to bring in marching bands too. But you know what, Harry, the one thing I remember about him, Richard mentioned his ability to get blood out of a penny, but he was very determined to get publicity. And back in those days, we ran, usually every year, we ran a special section devoted fully to the CFL in the Toronto Star. And, but under his ownership, one year, he called me and asked when the section was coming out. And I said, Harry, I don't think it's coming out. All the stories are written, but we haven't sold an ad. And it just pointed to how low the Argos had fallen, I think, in the minds of Toronto and corporate Toronto, which is probably even more disastrous. Nobody was interested in putting an ad in a section about the CFL and mostly about the Argos. So Harry says, you haven't sold an ad? And he was shocked. And he said, give me some time. And so Harry goes away. He calls me back a few hours later and said, I sold some ads for you. And he was so desperate to get this section in the paper and the publicity that it would generate. But to his credit, he called in some favors, got some ads sold, and we had a special section in the Toronto Star leading into one of the years he was owning the team.
Paul Woods, after hearing this, is it too ridiculous to say that the Argonauts were on their last legs until this infusion of money and ideas and glamour showed up?
Well, they were definitely going in the wrong direction. I mean, the announced attendance during Harry's 2 years was, I think the first year was announced at about 36,000, and the second year I think it was announced at about 30 or 32,000, but those numbers were not real. I mean, the strong belief reported at the time, and I believe it now, was that they were in the low 20s, when the Blue Jays were getting 54,000 a night or 50,000 a night. And the Montreal Alouettes had folded in 1987. The Calgary Stampeders had come close to folding in 85. I think obviously we could guess all day as to what might have happened had Harry stayed as the owner more than the 2 years he was there. But I think for sure having McNall, Gretzky, Candy turned around the mindset and the perception of the team, albeit we found out later that Bruce McNall didn't actually have the money that everybody thought he did. And it was really kind of a 1 year build and a 1 year of hype and excitement, and then it fell right off after that. But the league is still around. Whether the league would still have been around had that group not come in, I've made the case, and I think I would make it again, that I'm not sure the league would still be here had it not been for that group coming and kind of building up some enthusiasm and excitement and leading towards U.S. expansion, which, while most Canadian football fans think of expansion to the U.S. as a huge mistake, it bought some time. It brought in some money at a time when the league desperately needed both. So I think you can sort of thank the McNall group in some ways for the league still being around.
Okay. Now, Richard, over the course of that season, how often did you deal with Bruce McNall or Wayne Gretzky or John Candy? Any gossip we can hear anytime you sort of hung out with them? Like clubbing?
I really dealt with the suits. Susan Wax was in my office.
And who's Susan Wax?
Pardon me?
Who was Susan Wax?
Susan Wax was their CFO.
Okay.
A pint-sized little woman with really tough, really bright, tall high heels to get her up another 6 inches. I dealt with them, and Roy Malarker, I met Roy for the first time. We went on to be good friends when he became the president of the Ottawa hockey team. You know, I can remember their PR guy, I think, went on to run the Timberwolves. So they had some real talent on the business side. I would see them. I'd only see John and Wayne pretty much at game time. You know, Bruce let Sue do all of the talking and negotiations. And then there was Brian Cooper. You know, he's all the way through. He would have been a far better person than me to put on this. Brian's all through your book, and he was very instrumental in, you know, trying to do his best as the guy on everyone else is flying in for games. Brian was the one on the ground.
A quick question. A little bird told me that John Candy tried to recruit you.
Yeah, Harry tried to hire me too. I just told Harry, he said he'd pay me $10,000 more than I was making. And I said, Harry, you can't afford me. And I dodged that bullet. But then they did want to hire me. It was pretty tough when Wayne takes you aside along the side of the field and starts talking to you. And when John Candy sits in my office with a drink in his hand, you know, here's a guy I watched in the movies and was a big fan and offered you the job. But I already then I was starting to, I didn't know all the things that are in Paul's book. I learned a lot actually with this book. But you could smell there was something. And my wife at the time said, you know, it just doesn't smell right to me. And she was very, very right. It would have been a huge career mistake for me to take that job.
Well, he had good instincts. Well, welcome, Carl Brazley. It is so fantastic to see you. Thank you for joining us. This is a real pleasure. How are you?
Good to see you guys as well.
Well, we've been talking a little bit about that wonderful year, 1991. And what are your memories of that 30 years later with all the wisdom you've accumulated since then? Best year of your, yes, that's for you, Carl. That question's for you.
Oh, okay. Wow. I mean, I could spend a whole hour talking about that year. There were so many things that happened, so different. I remember when Coach Rita came to me and told me that I would be rooming with the Rocket. And I was like, oh, no. You don't understand. My roommate is Reggie Pleasant. I'm not rooming with him. And so that went on for about 2 or 3 days in camp. And so finally, Coach Rita, I mean, he's such a great guy. He comes in like, no, Carl, listen here. We need you to room with, like, we need somebody to stabilize. I said, I'm not the one. Well, and the first, we laugh about it. The first, man, maybe month or so, it was really hard because Rocket wouldn't talk. So I said, hey, you want to go get a burger? No, I can't go outside. I said, why can't you go outside? He said, man, because everybody would ask for autographs. I said, you ain't that famous. Come on, let's go get a burger. So, and he would not go. And I was like, man, so I'll tell other guys, man, I can't get the brother to talk, can't get him to go out to eat. I said, man, but so eventually we got to be really cool. And we used to do some really weird things, not weird, but some fun things. Like we used to wait till it got dark, and because he did draw a lot of attention. We wait till it get dark, and then we ride around the city and go do it because people couldn't recognize him as much then. But he would always say, "No, we gotta do this. I said, "Man, like, come on, bro, seriously? Like, we had to wait to go. We had to wait till it got dark. We had to wait to do this and that." And so it was, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because the owners made it fun. There was a lot of excitement. I think they saw that Rocket was really a good guy. He wasn't like this guy with his heads in the clouds because he made more than the whole league. He was just one of the guys, and all he wanted to be was just one of the guys. And so eventually that kind of came into play, and with a lot of other stuff. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun.
Well, Carl, when you were rooming with Raghib Ismail, so in A Year of the Rocket, that's what this book is all about, plus a lot of other really cool things from that 1991 season. Again, looking back in hindsight, he was only 21 years old. He was making an enormous amount of money. The CFL had scooped him, the Argos had scooped him from the NFL. He got some bad publicity for not showing up or not doing this or not doing that. Well, now, what do you think he was experiencing as a 21-year-old who had all the spotlight on him and the money kept coming up? He could certainly play, of course, we know that. But, you know, but as a human being, what was it like for a 21-year-old guy far from home?
That was probably the best part. I got a lot of humility, or learned a lot of humility when we were at Rocket. And I remember the owners wanted him to be really flamboyant. Excuse me. So they wanted him to buy a Ferrari and do all these things so it, you know, draw more attention. But he wouldn't do it. And I'm going like, dude, like really? Like I bought 5. So he would like, no, man, I can't do that and whatever. And I'll tell you something, hopefully he won't get too mad at me for telling you guys this, but we used to have best conversations. We'd sit around and he would tell me all this, and I would see so much, and we would get, so I'm gonna share with you a lot of tidbits. Sorry, Paul, I didn't give you everything. But, so I remember sometime when we were really bored, we would actually go get our mail. Now, it wasn't our mail, it was his mail, but they would just keep it in the mail thing in these big old huge bags. So we both grab a big bag, go up to the mail, we'd be going through letters, sitting on the floor, and they're like, oh, check it this one, look at this one. And let's just say people would send weird things, especially women. So we got like, we would get bank statements. I'm not after your money. See, I said, she makes more than I do. So we would get, it was all kind of stuff, people's family pictures, you know, you name it, and we probably saw it and then get tired of that. But I remember one time, we were talking, and we were just kind of talking about, you know, everything in general. He was telling me about the number of things he'd been through, his family, whatever. Then I looked up and he had tears in his eyes. I'm like, what the heck? And we were talking, and he was just sharing with me about how hard it was and all the expectations and pressure, and that he wasn't like what everybody thought he should be or wanted him to be, and how hard it was to try to, you know, he was such a good guy. He wanted to please people. But he had already found early in his career, so many people had already started taking advantage of him. And I'm not gonna call names, there's a lot of folks. But I remember one incident in particular where there was a gentleman who was supposed to help out the family with this whole thing and was charging him like a ton of money to do all this stuff for him and had not done one thing. And I mean, it was a ton of money, like thousands and thousands of dollars. And a lot of thousands of dollars. And I was just like, probably more than some people made. And so, and I remember him just, his comment was, I just don't want to be broke. And I'm saying like, you're like the highest paid football player, period, in any league. And his biggest concern, I mean, literally, he just didn't want to be broke. And people were coming at him in every which way, with every deal, but also taking his money in every which way possible. And I just remember I didn't have a response. You know, I said, I mean, I got it. I saw it. I mean, we were close enough. I saw a lot. And I just said, man, bro, it's like, I wouldn't want to be you. For all the money in the world that you got, wouldn't want to be you. So it was like, it was really profound. He was such a good person at heart. Let me tell you one other quick story that kind of puts it in perspective of how good a person he was. And a lot of guys know this. I don't know if people outside the team knows this, but there were some young guys who used to hang around the stadium all the time. And they would always come, and they loved Rocket. Rocket loved the kids and whatever. We'd see them, we'd take them out, we'd do different things with them. Well, it was about a week or so, one of the kids quit coming to practice, and we said, where's the other kid? And you guys might know him, so I'm not gonna call his name. And we said, well, where's the other kid? And they said, oh man, he can't come. I think his mom and them, they're getting put out their house. And we said, what? He said, yeah, like, I think they're getting put out their house. And man, brothers was going like, wow, like we probably need to do something. And how it goes, to my knowledge, nobody really did a whole bunch. We tried to call and figure it out, and then nothing happened. And then about a week later, the kid comes back and it's back to normal, everything goes around. So this goes around, nobody thought a whole bunch about it. He was gone, then he was back. I found out after the season, Rocket paid off his mom's house. He just went in, paid off the whole thing. Never told anybody, never said something, never hit the papers, made sure that we didn't say anything. And I didn't even know it, I'm his roommate. And I didn't even know it for the longest time. And then it kind of, some stuff happened, I said like, dude. And he just like, and that was it. That was the whole conversation. Like, like.
Isn't that something, eh? Wow.
Yeah.
What a big
so
heart.
there's so much stuff like that, good and bad, that happened. And he wasn't one that, he always, he feared the media because I think they had taken so much advantage of it. So he was super concerned about being in the media because so many times at big moments, they had taken advantage of it. So he was not a fan doing interviews or doing anything. And if he could avoid it, he would.
Just a very quick question about that, Carl. By taking advantage of Raghib, did he feel that they portrayed him like as an egomaniac or as difficult to deal with, or was he just unhappy how he was portrayed in media?
I think as much as anything, we still talk all the time like we're, close as can be. I mean, we talk all the time now. And I remember it was something else that happened. Somebody else did a story on recently about Notre Dame or something like that. And he just mentioned like, they never told, or kind of in his words, no, I can't really speak for him. It was like, they didn't tell the right story, right? It's like, not just they made him look good or look bad, it just wasn't the right story. It was like, they would talk about his money, but they wouldn't talk about, whatever, like whatever he felt like was important, like helping somebody or either this, or if he was trying to promote, a charity or something like that, they would want to talk about football and he wanted to talk about, and so he just didn't feel like, in my humble trying to guess in terms of his, his position was, he just didn't feel, he felt like it wasn't worth it because they never told the right story. They never told like what was important to him. They never spoke about, like, I remember he kind of resented how his family was portrayed, his mom and him and his family was portrayed. And so it was just like a lot of little things. He wasn't a guy who would fly off the handle, get mad. Man, he was super protective. Raghib became like a dad almost so early. Like you could say and do anything to him, but if you said or did something to somebody he really cared about, that would get him angry. But he took a lot and he would just bury it. I mean, I would just see him bury it. He wouldn't want to talk about it. He would just bury it. But if it was somebody else, then he'd get in front of like a guy on the team or somebody he really cared about, then that would get him going.
Okay. Oh, we've got a media member here, Paul Hunter. How was it dealing with Rocket?
It was very frustrating, actually, because you never got the chance to talk to him one-on-one. Well, you never really got to see him outside of formal press conferences. It was very difficult to engage. And the CFL is a league that, and that 91 team in particular, is full of great personalities, full of people who are available to talk all the time. So suddenly you had this guy who came in and seemed very miscast as someone who was going to promote the league and be the face of the Argos. Richard mentioned earlier that the ownership group really hadn't done their due diligence on the Skydome. I don't think they did their due diligence on Rocket. They got a guy, as I said, who was miscast, and you can't blame him for that. If someone gave me the money, I'd take it too. But he did not have the personality or the desire to put himself out there as the guy selling the CFL and selling the Toronto Argos. So he was very much out of place, and it went from being frustrating, I think, almost to pitiful. Like you started to feel sorry for him after a while, and it was tough. It just didn't work. Well, the team won. He was brilliant on the field, and the team won, but he wasn't the right guy for that role.
Okay. I'd like to go back to Carl just for a moment, guys, if I can, because I just want to catch up with Carl. We've got a bit of video here that Serena is going to show, and you're in it. And
All right, Serena, I'm not talking to the press after this.
no, what we'd like you to do is explain yourself after you look at this video.
Explain yourself.
Thanks, Paul. Help.
Just his footing. Kyle Brazley has water everywhere. Commissioner Donald Krupp even had water dumped over his head of the Argos that year. Well, Kyle Brazley is determined to soak everybody on the sidelines around the Argo bench. Well, you can always tell a veteran. I mean, they know how to celebrate. It's been a while since Kyle Brazley's been able to celebrate. He's taking full advantage of it.
All I can say, it wasn't me, it was an imposter. No, everybody said they wanted to be a part of it. I was just trying to be inclusive, get everybody into it. Mary, I did not see you there. I missed you. I would have.
I saw you coming. No, just put that into context. Why were you so happy? And what was the moment you were celebrating? And, it was out of character for you to be, this crazy in public, really. So we're just wondering what made you so happy.
See, Paul, Mary said I wasn't crazy in public, so it was. I think it was like a burden had been lifted off our shoulders. That was like what people talk about. We had a great team. We had all this talent and things like that, and we did. But it also heightened the pressure. So every mistake was magnified. Everything was bigger than life. And it just really felt like we were characters. I mean, if you guys knew DK Smith and that, just the whole team, Mazzati. Oh my goodness, we were just like a bunch of characters. But now all of a sudden we had to become this super team. We had the Rocket, we had this, and we had that. We had to be like that, but we were really just a bunch of misfits who like to have fun and play football. And so I think that was the Eastern Final, maybe. And so the pressure was off. Would we even make it to the Grey Cup? Blah, blah, blah. And so, because once you get to the Grey Cup, pressure's off, you just play, right? And so the thing was just, getting past that game. It was, at that point, it was just fun. And plus, nobody can say anything to you when they're doing an interview and you're pouring water on their head. They just got to keep doing it. So.
I just want to dart over to Richard very quickly, then I want to get back to Carl and to Paul Woods. But Richard, during this time, and Carl speaking so eloquently about this burden being lifted off of their shoulders and living up to all they've been billed as, what was going on at the Skydome level? The crowds, from your end of things, were things really sailing along beautifully?
I think they were. I mean, the team was really good, and the crowds were so far superior to what they'd been. And I think Paul was being generous. I think they're probably doing crowds in the teens. So listen, the crowds are really good, but they weren't 54,000 like the Blue Jays were doing. I think their business plan called for more. I think they were looking for in the 40s. I think it did very well in their first game, close to 50. And the other ones were really good. I mean, the Argos would sure kill for those crowds today, but they were not what they expected. So I think that was it. Maybe they were starting to realize that things weren't quite as easy as they were. Maybe that, but things hadn't really boiled to a head. They'd cottoned on that the way both the Blue Jays and the Argos leases were not quite as clear as they should be. Paul Beeston thought he had the first rights to book games. There was clauses that you could interpret maybe the Argos had an equal chance. Paul wanted no part of that. Susan Wax was really pushing for it. So there was starting to be those tensions. When the numbers aren't there, they're not controlling costs at all. So they're starting to go in the red really quickly. We all know that Bruce didn't have the cash. So then the pressure started ratcheting up.
Okay. All right. Well, we're starting to have some questions rolling in, which is wonderful. Thank you to everybody. And we've got a couple from one of the listeners, some great ones, and they're for Carl Brazley. So Carl, aside from yourself, who was the best defensive player that you ever played with?
They did say aside from me, right?
Yes, aside from you.
That was hard. Probably Rodney Hardy, Wood, as we would call him. He was just so consistent and a disruptor. Like you knew you could count on him. Even though he was mean and gruff, and he would cuss us out in the huddle, and he would tell us, "You little skinny defensive backs, do your job. I'm trying to run around." So we used to laugh, and sometimes we just like to see Rodney get mad. But he was so good and so consistent. And like so we knew whatever Rodney's responsibility, that was going to be taken care of. We just had to worry about everybody else. So probably Rodney.
And who were some of the most difficult offensive players to cover, play against, contain, stop, annihilate, pour water on?
Yeah. So the two that come to mind is James Murphy from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as a receiver. As a defensive back, I had pretty good speed, so I could run with everybody. That was, and usually people say that, but that wasn't an issue with me. But it seems like James Murphy was the exact clone of me, but on offense. And he was just so hard for me. He was as fast as I was, as quick as I was. He was probably smarter than I was. And we would just battle. I'd get him one game, he'd get me the next. Oh, I got it. And it was just always battle. Great player. I mean, great attitude, sportsmanship and everything, just an all-around good player. And the other one was Doug Flutie, because he would wear me out. And like, you would cover your guy, you look at him, and Flutie's still running around with the ball doing like this. I would go like, will you please throw that daggone ball? And Doug was just such a great offensive player. And pinball. So we couldn't even touch him in practice. So we knew other people, he gave other people fits. So anyway.
That's great. You mentioned Daryl K. Smith a little bit earlier, and Paul Woods, I'd like to throw it back to you. Tell us about Daryl K.
Well, one of the things that I found in this project was just remembering how great Daryl K. Smith was. Serena mentioned the video, the YouTube channel, and there's a package I put together of Daryl K. Smith highlights, and he's just an extraordinary receiver. Carl, I have a question for you about DK. In the last few years, there have been 3 receivers added to the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, 2 of whom you played with, and all 3 of whom you played against. I'm talking about Terry Greer, Merv Fernandez, and David Williams. Terry and David, of course, were your teammates at times, and you also played against them. You played against Merv. They had another characteristic in common, aside from playing against you, and that was that they all had fairly short careers of 6 or 7 years in Canadian football. And despite having such short careers, they were put into the Hall of Fame. I would make the case that I think Daryl K. Smith deserves that as well. That he also had a 7-year career with the Argonauts. I think he's right up there with Terry Greer as maybe the greatest receiver the Argos ever had. Daryl Mitchell, of course, came a little bit later. Tell me about DK. Do you agree that he deserves inclusion into the Hall of Fame? And tell me about what he was like.
Definitely. I think Daryl, DK should go into the Hall of Fame. and it's really like a body of work. DK came through at big moments. Anybody can catch it with it easy, but I remember he made some of the most difficult catches at big moments, which was really, really huge. That's when you need players to step up. It's in the big moments. But he was like, oh man, he was the best teammate. He was so much fun and so crazy. And we used to have the best time. We would joke back and forth. So we would literally get in these fights on the field from the defense to the offense. And he would go around telling the defensive backs he's going to get him cut. Braves, I like you, but I'm going to get you cut today. So he's going to beat me in practice. And so every time I would intercept the ball, I would take it back to the huddle and say, DK, did you lose this? And whatever. And so we would just go, it was the most fun, but we pushed each other too. And we had some real serious talks. DK was really a great player and I hate that he's gone, but just an awesome teammate, a ton of fun, and just a great athlete.
Thank you.
Mary, can I ask Carl a question? So Carl, that was an awesome team. I mean, you were deep at so many positions, so many stars. Could you have won the Grey Cup without Rocket? And the reason I ask that, because maybe McNall could have lasted longer if he wasn't paying millions of dollars to one player. If he had the roster, maybe picks up a player that not near as good as the Rocket to fill that position. But probably millions less. Because I just wonder if he could have been more successful that way. And could you have won the Grey Cup?
Great question. Answer is easily yes. I think that was a more profound point that Paul's book brings out, and or really people should take away. And to me, and I'm no financier or anything like that, but I've been around sports for a little while. I think it's the energy that you can generate with the investment. It was, so people talk about the 91 team that won the championship and when Rocket came, but really what happened was it was the investment in a team. It was the excitement, it's the interest. But so what happens if you do that to a whole league? And so, we were loving the attention. It was a lot of fun, but it shouldn't have just been one team. It should have been every team, right? And you imagine what could have happened if not one team carried the excitement, but every team started promoting and the cities got behind it. Because I tell you, the whole city was behind us. We could almost do no wrong during that time. We were winning, people were excited, but we would talk to people from other teams, and they said, "Man, I wish I could get y'all team. Tell them to trade for me. We just want to be in a team where there's that much excitement," because they're not that excited where I'm at, where we're playing. And I think it would have made the whole league that much better. And not to point any fingers, but man, the short-sightedness of not understanding, like any business, man, if you want it to be great, you gotta invest. You gotta invest some. And it wasn't my money, obviously, but that was and I still think such a great opportunity. I still have people here that ask me like 10,000 questions about the CFL. There's interest, but it's just not the investment. So I'll stop right there.
Paul Woods, not only being an Argo expert, you're a CFL historian. Do you happen to have any of those special sections that Paul Hunter referred to?
Oh, probably. I got 2 tons of paper in my basement. So yeah, probably. I've got lots of Paul Hunter and Mary Ormsby stories, that's for sure.
That's kind of sad, but okay.
Okay. Came in handy during the research, that's for sure.
Hey,
All
Paul,
right.
can I ask Paul a question?
Yeah.
Do you think someone could pull off what McNall and company did then? Could they do it now? Could someone in the CFL, one of the ownership groups, bring in a big star like this and do it all over again?
Yeah, I don't think you could. I've often said since I started on this project and since it's come out, I've said, like, I think it never happened before, and I don't think it'll ever happen again. And I mean, one of the things that we know, they paid the McNall group paid Rocket Ismail more money than any football player had ever been paid in any league. He was making more money than Joe Montana in the NFL. He was making the most money had ever paid to anybody. And since 1991, the salary gap between the leagues has grown so much that if a CFL team were to now do the equivalent to pay the first round pick, let's say Trevor Lawrence was coming out of the draft this year into the NFL, for a CFL team to pay him more than any player had ever been repaid, they'd have to pay him about $55 or $60 million a season. And of course, that's just not even comprehensible. The salary cap is still only $5.5 million for the whole team. So I don't see it. I mean, I don't mean you couldn't build a certain amount of buzz around the league. I do believe that is possible. I don't think you could do it the way McNall and Gretzky and Candy did with paying the one player so much more than everybody else. But somebody's mentioned, I've heard questions along the way, and I think there might even be one in the chat about what about celebrity ownership now? What if you were to get, today's equivalent of Wayne Gretzky, Sidney Crosby or somebody like that, and some famous actor or comedian, that would build buzz, I think. I'm not sure it would be the same. I mean, things are not as simple. We've now got the Raptors in town. We've got TFC in town. There's the TV world and the internet world has exploded. The availability of options is so huge. So I don't know. I don't think it could, Paul, to be honest with you.
So I have a question for Paul Woods as well. It's about John Candy, and somebody wrote, should John Candy be in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'll tell you, when I interviewed Dan Aykroyd for the book, and of course, Dan was great friends with John. Dan came back to lead the revitalized Blues Brothers, excuse me, at the opening game in 1991. He loves John, and he said to me, Why isn't Highway 400 named the John Candy Memorial Highway? Whether he should be in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, that's a good question. He absolutely should be on the Argos Wall of Honor. They have a banner up in BMO with the greatest Argos of all time, Pinball Clemens and Joe Kroll and Conrad Holloway and all players of that ilk. John Candy's name should be up there, absolutely.
So how important, Paul, was John Candy's story for you when you were writing this book?
Well, it became huge. I mean, I kind of knew from just being a fan back then 30 years ago how much John Candy meant to the team and to the league and to me personally. And my daughter Rachel's on here tonight. She and my son David and I went to a practice in Edmonton, and there's a picture of the three of John Candy and my two kids taken the day before the game when the Argos were there. So that matters a lot. And so I knew he was important, but I didn't really have, I was still amazed by the fact that I interviewed more than 100 people. Not one person had a bad word to say about John, and most people I interviewed had nothing but praise and love for John Candy. Whether it was executives, whether it was players, whether it was the equipment manager, whether it was people from other cities, the journalists, everybody just fell in love with John because he plunged himself right into everything that year. He was one of the biggest celebrities in Hollywood, making a lot of money from movies. He put that all on hold to go to every Argo game that year. And not only go to the games, he'd go to the radio stations the morning before the game in Edmonton and Regina at 5 a.m, talking up tomorrow night's game. Come out, buy tickets, come and see the show. Yeah, John he's absolutely one of the heroes of the story.
And thank you, Paul. And there's a question actually for Richard from Marcus. Richard, you did some amazing things with MLSC. What do you think they can be doing? What do you think they can be doing better to promote the team they own today?
Wow. They've got, I love the fact that, I had one team, then I had two teams, then I had three teams, then I had four teams. And a good friend of mine who had a couple teams says, I wish I only had one. So they've got so many teams to focus on. It's very interesting. They've got the president who has soccer and football together, other than they share a name in North America for their sport. There's, I'm not sure that's the right focus. They put it into a great stadium. It's really tough. I'm glad it's not on my watch. It's, there's been a lot of, as Paul mentioned, you've got TFC now. You've got the Raptors. You got the young demographic, and the demographics on the Argos are old. Their territory is more 905. So boy, and it's not going to be tailgate parties. They keep bringing out the tailgate parties. That's not going to happen in Ontario. So I don't know. Maybe they could advertise it more. I don't see a lot of advertising for it, but I know they're losing their shirt on it, and the franchise would be in real trouble if it wasn't MLSE. I remember the last time I brought it to the board whether we were going to buy the Argos, and I voted against it. I said to the board, we shouldn't do this, because what I said was, boy, if we can't get it to work, what happens to the team? I mean, if MLSE can't get it to work, who will say I can do a better job than them? And so I think the Argos are penalized a bit because they're just one of a bunch, but they're saved because MLSE throws off so much money, and because Bell and Rogers don't care about it, because the profits or losses don't get added in to because they're minority shareholders. They don't really worry about the profits. They're looking at the television, what all those teams bring. So the Argos are lucky they've got a rich owner that's probably not going anywhere, but maybe if there was owners that were more focused, it would be better, but I don't know.
Thank you, Richard. So we have another question for Carl. Carl and Paul, it says, but any fun stories from putting together the Homeboys Network sketches with Pinball and Doran Major?
No, I think that's Paul Hunter, not Paul Woods. Paul Hunter was one of the stars of the Homeboys Network, right?
It's probably the worst television performance ever.
It's like Weekend at Bernie's before the movie actually came out.
I thought you was gonna be up for an Oscar or something, or Emmy or something.
That was great fun, but the guys did I just thought it was fantastic what they did, having this fun show that they'd play at halftime and show personality, and it was brilliant. I didn't show any personality when I was on, but the guys, Doran and Pinball and Carl, it was really quite a vehicle for the league, I think, because they brought through some of the stars of the league too to basically embarrass and make fun of, and it was terrific. I'd like to hear what Carl thought of it and how he remembers it.
It was the most fun to this day I probably ever had doing anything. It was a license to be a total goofball. And I was just amazed that, so probably the most amazing thing about the Homeboys report was that every week when we go in to play a game, you see the big TV trucks, and I'd be out warming up, and somebody would come to me, Carl, like, who y'all get this week? What y'all doing this week? Like people were asking on the street, like, what are we doing this week? Like, y'all know this is a spoof, right? This is not real. So it was just a lot of fun. John Candy was on it. I know Wayne Gretzky was on. Wayne was like scared to get on camera with us. I'm like, we'll be easy on you. So, but yeah, it was just a blast. It was just a lot of fun.
And
it was really, you were the mastermind of it, right? Carl you were the producer?
Yes, yeah. So it was an idea I came up with, and I asked Doran and Mike, and they looked at me first. And I told them, I said, basically, this is gonna be real easy. Let's just do everything people wish they could do on camera but can't. They go, okay. So that was it. That was the whole show.
So what did you come up with the names Jerome Love and Benny Feelgood, or did they come up with those themselves?
Of course I came up with them, Paul. Look at my literary talents. Are you questioning my abilities?
Never.
No, it was, and they, the thing about it was, so every show was done probably 20 or 30 minutes before we aired. So we would talk about, we would be in practice, like, well, what are we doing tonight? Let's talk about the movies. No script, no anything. I would say, well, just do this. And I would give them one or two clues or hints of what I was thinking. And they would take it and run with it. There was only one show that sort of almost had a script. It didn't have a script. Doran was running late, and they told him we had to still get the show out to get it produced. And so Doran had told us he was stopping, of all things, that he was going to bring food because he hadn't eaten. So he comes in with a box of chicken. So we tape up the box of chicken and we write with a magic marker on a box of bird. So then the whole sketch was about how he got a deal to get this box of bird, and he got his hair cut and everything else. And it was great. I mean, but it was totally impromptu every time out. So we had just said, man, well, can you get it? We're going to do something with the chicken. And that was about as close to planning as we got to. So that was it. It was just a blast.
Sounds like you guys had a lot of fun.
Oh my goodness, it was ridiculous.
And Paul, was there a chapter in the book that was particularly challenging for you to write?
Oh boy, that's a question I haven't been asked before. Actually the biggest challenges for me was cutting. Like, I could have easily done 500 pages, but no, even as great a publisher as Sutherland House is, they would not have published a 500-page book about the story. So I mean, I had to make some very painful cuts to the sort of the pre-1991 stuff in particular. I had quite a bit more written about Harry Ornest, and quite a bit more. Harry Ornest deserves a book of his own. I had quite a bit of stuff written about the 1990 Argos, who had the greatest offense we've ever seen in the league, and some really amazing and some funny things that happened with that team that just didn't make the cut. I think that was the toughest thing, was how do I keep it tight enough that people can read it without taking 3 weeks to finish it. but the parts that weren't hard at all were the parts that I liked the most. The John Candy chapter, the Grey Cup chapter. You know, to be able to hear some of the stories that some of the players and coaches told me about things like Rocket's kickoff return. You know, the details that I was given about what was said by the coaches on the sideline before the ball was kicked, and what was said by the special teams players out on the field that we're going to change up the play and we're going to veer to the right, and guys telling me, yeah, you know, I might have held somebody, but I looked around and there were no flags. And Pinball saying he couldn't see where Rocket was, but he could hear from the noise of the crowd that he knew it was working. That kind of stuff was super easy and fun to write.
Thanks. And so we'll do one more question, unless somebody has other questions, you can add them in here. But one more we got for Carl. Carl, you played in the Grey Cup in 83, 87, and 91. How do each compare?
You know, each Grey Cup has this. So getting to the Grey Cup is such a journey. And then when you get there, it's kind of like, okay, now it's the release, and now you just got to prove yourself. And I remember in 83, I had just come back and had got on the Argonauts team. And I remember everything just started to click when I came back. And it just kept kind of going and going. And you could sense the excitement because it had been so long since the Argonauts had won a Grey Cup. And I wasn't aware of all that. I didn't know all the history, but I could tell it was really important. And so it was important to me because I knew it was important to everybody else, even though I didn't get it. And then the other Grey Cups where it wasn't 87, it was 82, but that was, I think, before that. Okay, so whenever it was, but no, I think it was 80. I think I went to one before.
I think you played in 80. You played in 81 in Ottawa.
81, that's right. What it was, not 82. 81 in Ottawa, and then in 87 I was down in the NFL, and then came back after that. But then in 91, I was really happy for Rocket. But by the year's end, there was so much pressure, and winning that took so much pressure off of him. And I think the other guys on the team felt that way as well. You know, when you first come in, everybody was whispering about the guy who was making all the money. And then what's he going to be like, and all this and all the stuff that was going on. We were just blown away by all the razzle and the dazzle. But by the end of the year, it was a band of brothers who wanted to win. We knew there was still pressure on Rocket. There was pressure. We fell in love with our ownership. We wanted to win for them. John Candy was amazing. I mean, he's taking us to his home. He's sitting down with us. We're like, he's one of the team. I mean, he's not an owner at this point. He's one of the team. And he's telling stories about how he always wanted to play football, but got hurt and couldn't play. And he's just one of the team. So that was a game not for the Toronto Argonauts. It was for some of the people of the Toronto Argonauts. It was for the people who really deserved to have a win. And one of them was Rocket. One of them definitely was John Candy. And there was a number of other people in the city who just believed and went all out. And let me say this one other thing too. People like Lori Bursey, the front office was unbelievably amazing at the Argonauts at that time. They were breaking their backs to put up with all the demands and everything else. It was just so many people that you saw were so vested. I mean, you actually realize it ain't even about us anymore. But there is some people that this really is about. They had given so incredibly much for this to happen. You could tell they believe in, and they couldn't get out in the field. So those of us who could, we had said prior that there are no excuses, none accepted, none expected. We just have to win, period. And so that was the only way we was going to leave that stadium. Is with a win. And so, but it really was about the other people. And I didn't feel like I needed to win one. I mean, I wanted to win for sure, but I knew who I was playing for. It was for the other folks.
So we'll do one more question. I know we'll go a little over time, but Paul Woods, any plans to write a follow-up on Flutie Ball?
Okay. Well, you know, I have learned since I stopped working full time about a decade ago, or my longest career, I've learned never to say never. I didn't think I would write books. I didn't think I would teach. I didn't think I would do a lot of things I ended up doing. So I would never say never. And I have been asked that question. I think it's Nick that's asked the question. And Nick, I'm going to say no at this point, just because I don't see it as great of a story as what the 1983 and 1991 Argos were. Those, I mean, obviously, you know, I think the 96, 97 Argonauts with Doug Flutie, we will never see an Argonaut team that good ever again. That was probably the greatest team the Canadian Football League's ever seen. But it was so good. I don't see any drama. I don't see the story arc the way I saw it with you know, the first book, where we went from the worst year in Argonaut history in 1981 to the Grey Cup in 83 with most of the same players. You know, so they'd grown from awful to champions and broke that drought. And then 91, of course, the storylines were endless, on the field, off the field, in the league, around the team. I just don't know that I could make a story about 96, 97 very dramatic. Also, I'm not sure Doug Flutie would want to cooperate, and you couldn't do it without Doug. So I was going to say never, but to me, it's about the storytelling. And the thing I loved about writing this particular book was that it was such a great story. And with the help of, you know, Richard and Carl and all the players and coaches and people we haven't talked about tonight, like Chris Gaines and of course Pinball and Dunnigan, and you know, even the unsung heroes like Keith Costello with those fumble kickoffs, fumble recoveries in the Grey Cup. So many people were such a huge part of the story. I don't know that I could top that, frankly. Plus, it did take 4.5 years of my life, and I don't know if I've got that in me either. But I am so appreciative of the people that helped me do this. We've had 4 of them on the panel tonight, and I'm grateful for that. And we'll see. You never know. Maybe. That's a very non-committal answer.
Oh, you could write one about the homework report.
Absolutely. Well, I think that the next project's got to be, Carl and I have got to team up and find some money from Hollywood and bankroll a movie about the 1991 Argonauts, right? There we go.
Yes, sir.
Well, I want to thank everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our panelists today and all of you who are either dialed in or watching the replay on YouTube. If you need to, please feel free to contact me via Eventbrite. A discount code is still available at Sutherland House Books website. It is Rocket, that's Rocket in all caps 20. Again, I thank you, and I hope you all have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good to
you
see
so
everybody.
much. This was fun.
Paul,
Good to see
Mary,
you.
everybody.
Bye, Carl.
See you,
Bye,
Carl.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
guys.
Hey, Richard.
Thanks, everybody. It was wonderful.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.